Darren, it's always great to spend some time with you. I love talking about sales and leadership and social with you. And that's actually one of the things we wanted to highlight today is kind of the shift. I think both of us were veterans of the selling game and, just kind of watching the shift that's transpired over the last couple of years. Lots of new terrain for us as sellers, but right now we're in new terrain as well because we have new tools, new resources, new expectations from customers. Would love to get your thoughts on the shift in selling and the shift in social.
Yeah, Carson. I mean, I think that this is really cool because I don't think we ever would have met without social, right? And I have to credit Megan Reed on my team who saw a post that you shared, I don't know, 3 months ago, tagged me in it. I responded to you. We had a brief message on DMs, had another call, and now we're sitting here today actually collaborating.
Amazing.
And so I think that's the way that a guy like you and a guy like me even have the opportunity to be on a call together. And so, but yeah, for me, I mean, I think, so I've been in sales, gosh, not as long as you have, but, probably around 7 years. And I've seen a lot of shift in 7 years. And I went from door to door selling PEO HR software to the pandemic happening and being like, oh my gosh, I can't go knock on people's doors anymore. What am I going to do? And that's when I dove really deep into social, dug really deep into content, engaging with folks, not only in our US bubble, but globally, because that's what LinkedIn and other solutions gave me the ability to do. So it's been huge for me. I mean, I've been able to maximize my time, reach more people, have more fun doing it, and ultimately bring a lot more revenue to myself and the organizations that I've been a part of.
I love that. And here's the thing. I think a lot of sellers understand that, they should be leveraging social tools. Maybe they think that they should be posting more or whatever it is. But I think that's where we struggle to get out of the gate sometimes because it's like, what do I post? What do I say? And honestly, look, I have landed very significant deals that started on and heavily featured LinkedIn because it enabled me to connect, open the door, turn it into an actual physical meeting. And then there were a lot of sales fundamentals that transpired along the way. I'm not getting POs sent to me on LinkedIn. So if you're a seller today, Darren, tell us, how do we start? What type of methodology should we employ? And when and where does that leverage social, and when does that leverage in person?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, we're not getting POs in our LinkedIn DMs. I think that's maybe a way into the future process. But I think for me, right, like where I started was, how can I be a thought leader, right? And I sell to the C-suite. I sell to VPs and C-suite. And I've always been told my entire career that if you can't teach them something, then they don't really care to meet with you, right? And so my ultimate goal is to teach them something that they don't know. And for me, that's posting content. That's posting related content to their industry, showing up where they are, right? Like, we used to go to networking events where we knew our prospects were going to be, right? We would get in the car, we'd put on a suit jacket, we'd go drink some beer or do whatever we want with our prospects because we knew where they were going to be there. Today, I know that I'm going to show up on their feed in the morning. And so that's the key for me, is like, I'm just going to keep doing that every day. So when I finally reach out to them, I don't know, 30 or 45 days after I actually connect with them, they know me. They know I have 2 kids. They know my wife's name is Caitlin. They know I work for Wellthy and what I do in the world of caregiving. They know I run a startup. They know all of this stuff about me. So when I message them, I'm not cold. And I think that's the key philosophy for me, is just like, I'm a man of faith, and we talk about spoon feeding a lot, right? I'm trying to spoon feed my prospects what I do, so when I finally get in there, they actually know what I'm doing.
A couple things you said there, Darren, that were exceptionally powerful to me. Number one, positioning yourself as a thought leader. Think about what they don't know. Think about what they're already talking about. Social gives you this amazing portal into their lives as well. You have the ability to follow these key shareholders, stakeholders, these people that you want to be connecting with, these influencers. You have the capability to follow them, see what they talk about. And that's not limited to LinkedIn. You can look at Twitter, you can look at Instagram, whatever it is, whatever these mediums are. Don't discriminate against any of them, because they give you a window, likewise, into your target client. Deals happen as a result of relationships, and relationships happen because there's some kind of synergy, or you're You uncover that you're kindred spirits. I'll give you a case in point. A couple years back, I started doing this, right? As you said, Darren, there's no geographical barriers anymore to like the water cooler talking about sales, talking about leadership. And I realized this a couple years ago in the pandemic that I could talk to anybody. Other people started calling it a podcast. I refuted the term because that implies commitment and sophistication, which I don't want or have. I don't have the time for that. I got a full-time gig. But what ended up transpiring is I started having conversations with customer executives about things that they cared about, leadership, culture, all of these things that are magical. So think about what is the unique value that you can bring. I'm helping to amplify their message and brand broadly. The other thing, you said something that really struck me, because I think a lot of sellers, they connect and it's like, oh man, I got to reach out immediately and I got to tell them everything I do. You said 30 to 45 days after you're connected, that's when you reach out. So I think those were two things that really jumped out at me, and I'd love to spend a little bit more time there. So what is kind of, if you're like me, my process has changed a lot over the years. I always knew social was important. I might add a new tool. I might tweak my messaging. But what have been some of your key learnings with your approach over the years?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of data. I think if anybody follows me, they know that. And so the first thing is like, I just go back to 2012, 13, 14, and 15, and I look at my DMs, right? And I'm like, holy crap, I was a terrible seller back then. Because I would connect with somebody and I'd say, hey, let me tell you about Wellthy. Here's what I do. Can I meet with you next Wednesday at 2:00? And it's like, no, absolutely not. And my ratios to first meetings and messaging was so low, but I also didn't have people around me telling me that this was not the right way to sell. And so I think the big key differentiator for me was starting to surround myself with people that were 5 to 6 years ahead of me in this game. So the Dale Duprees, the Morgan Ingrams, the John Barrowses, the list goes on, right? And so that's where everything changed for me, as I just started watching these guys and gals and what they were doing. And then also just like, when I became a founder of a profitable startup, I started getting a lot of outreach to me, right? And I would look at that stuff and I would say, like, there's no way I'm responding to this, right? And then every once in a while, somebody would nurture me, right? And they would engage with my stuff, and they would send me leads for SaaSBros, or they would send me leads for Wellthy, and then they would pounce, right? And that meeting was sealed. We were good. And so I always try to put myself in the shoes of the prospect, right? What would they want to hear from me, and why would they respond to this message? And I think it's Will Allred at Lavender always says, just read your email to yourself before you send it. Read your DM to yourself before you send it. Would you respond to it? Yes, send it. If not, delete it. And so that's the big shift for me, is just data, influences around me, and then what would I want as a prospect.
I've got one of my colleague mentors that she told me basically something along the lines of, don't put anything in place, don't do anything from a process improvement perspective that isn't trackable. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 variables that I like to call out that we can control, because I'm also a big believer in controlling the controllables, and it's quality of messaging, quantity of outreach, and consistency of execution over time. And so what that means to me is exactly what you said, Darren. I go back and I read some of the messages that I used to send in social selling. They're horrible. They were terrible. I can see why I didn't get a response, right? I'd love to do this or that. Or, let me tell you all the things that our organization does. And those aren't the things that resonate, because we're not meeting them where they are. Mm-hmm. The other thing, quantity. Just like anyone, I could reach out to 5-10 executives and go for the room. But guess what? If I reach out to 500 influencers, director and above in an organization, that's where you can create a groundswell. That's where you can start meeting with people. You have these meetings, and then that knowledge that you glean ultimately will become the knowledge that is valuable to the CEO or the CFO or whomever you're trying to ultimately connect with. I've had many situations over the years that were I connected with other executives other than the ones I originally set out to meet with, but I ultimately got that meeting because of the groundswell that I was able to create. The other thing too, the tide eventually turns. I liked that you called out, Darren, that originally what you were doing was going out and following a lot of these aspirational mentor type people that were doing what you ultimately wanted to do. I used to reach out to Jeb Blount, Jeffrey Gitomer, be like, hey, can I be on your podcast? I wrote a book several years ago, type of thing. And I got on. And what's interesting is about 3-4 years ago, I never had to ask to be on a podcast again. I just started doing all these podcasts, and now I get asked to be on them all the time.
Yeah.
And I think what I would tell sellers or anybody that cares about their brand, which should be anybody watching, is that, I was having a conversation the other day, mentoring someone. It's think about what you want to be known for. And then find all the different mediums that can achieve that. Not everybody's comfortable with video. Maybe you want to blog. Maybe you want to do some of these other things that you can do, but create. And doing it is better than not doing it. Like even those garbage messages that I sent years ago, it's better than doing absolutely nothing. Not much, but it's better than nothing. And then think about the means to an end. You're using it to get a person-to-person connection and meeting. You're not trying to sell anything. We're not getting POs in our inbox. Just use it to get the meeting and create an actual relationship. Because I think the future is going to be a blend of digital selling and in-person work. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm going to go back to something you said back in the middle of that when you talked about like that brand piece. And I think that like when we step back over the last month and we observe LinkedIn, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of layoffs in tech, right? But one thing that I've been coaching people on over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've literally been saying, hey, go look at the individuals that got laid off that have a brand. Not one of them I've been able to notify or look at that hasn't had a job offer within 48 hours, right? So it's bigger than what you're doing in your job. It's huge, right? And then you have the ability to help others in that same aspect. And it's been a beautiful thing to watch. And so to answer your follow-up question, that blend, right? So me and you were talking right now, in about 45 minutes, I have to head to the airport and head to Memphis. And in Memphis, I get to speak with 150 CHROs that are all in and around Tennessee. And that's literally my ICP and everyone that I talk to. But without that, I would be sitting here, I'd probably be watching it from afar, and I had to get an email list and I'd reach out to all these people, and I wouldn't really have the ability to do that. And so my inclination, right, and like what I'm seeing in the future is a blend of like, how do we build those in-person relationships? How do we get in person with our customers and clients? But also, how do we meet them where they are on social, right? How do we show up when we're not in person? And I was in Atlanta at the World at Work conference 2.5 months ago. And instead of talking about Wellthy, right, because everybody could see our banner, they knew what we did. I just started asking all of the buyers. I'm like, hey, what do you want right now from a seller? Like when they're reaching out to you, what do you want? I asked every single one of them the same thing. And 6 out of 10 of them said, I want sellers to come back and take me out to lunch or take me to dinner. Right. And then 4 of them were like, hey, I want that CEO that you sold to 6 months ago to give me a call and tell you to call them. Right. So it's that peer-to-peer selling, right? Where in both of those things are out of me. I'm not doing any of those, right? Like that's all just their relationships and their network. And so I thought that was key. I'm continuing to see it work. I traveled last week to Burlington to meet with a lady that was in person, and it was just, we connected so much deeper. And I think we're missing that.
Couldn't agree more. It's fascinating. And as you pointed out earlier, and first off, Darren, I thought you got all spiffy because of me, but now I know it's because you're traveling and you're going to see people.
So. I have my backwards hat on and my t-shirt. People can see this and be like, who is that guy?
Right. This is the Darren McKee. This is the real one.
Yeah.
So what's fascinating to me, like, as you pointed out earlier, I definitely have the benefit of a long sales career. I've been doing this for a while, but the beauty of it is like having done the mechanics of like the door-to-door to the one-call close environment, all the way to the enterprise selling and the very long sales cycles. And if I look back and I realize anything, it's exactly what you just said. It's the authentic relationship that was what beget the real deals. I look back at some of the biggest deals that I've ever had in my entire career, and they've all been because of real relationships that were formed, time that was spent in person. Now, some of them started on LinkedIn, or they started because I saw some kind of actionable insight, like a business journal or a sales navigator feed said, hey, there's a new C-level here. And then I would react and respond, and I got in their office faster than the competition, even if they were thinking about the competition, right? So the key element is using these things to be signals to tell you, hey, it's time to do this or that. I'm a big believer in probability and odds, and so that's where the process comes into play, but it has to have people at the heart of it. Something else that you said that I think was I would love to double down on, because all of us at some point are likely going to face the prospect of looking for another gig. Almost over a decade ago, I left a large organization, and I had been a director of sales there. And I thought, I can get any job I want. I was in my 20s. I was very cocky. And it took me over a year to find something that wasn't even comparable to what I made financially, because I had no network. Because I had spent time there and I thought I would retire from this organization. I had never spent time meaningfully investing in network. But to your point, then I got myself into a position where in the last several years, I mean, I may get 5, 10 things thrown at me every year, and very interesting things. But, for me, it's more important to be part of a culture and to work for a leader that I love. And I'm there now. So, but my point is, if you want to put yourself in a position where you're the commodity, create that brand around yourself where you have meaningful, authentic relationships, and it's going to achieve whatever you want from a career perspective and also from a deal perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think you can even go one level deeper there too, with talking about multiple streams of income, right? As a young seller, and having a brand and having different, I think you're going to see a massive shift. And I talked about this last week. You're going to see a massive shift in your elite sellers having affiliate partnerships with 10 to 20 different companies and being advisors with 5 or 6 and banking on those shares and those companies going public and then retiring in their late 30s, right? That's already happening, and it's going to continue to happen. I was sitting with my brother right out here on this porch about a week and a half ago, and he looked at me. He just said, "Man, I feel really bad for those that are laid off that have no brand." Because it's really difficult. But thankfully, the community on LinkedIn is so strong that those of us with the brand can shout them out and get the same type of reach that they would themselves. And so I think that community is so big. And these 3 guys are going to kill me for saying this, but whatever. I don't know which one said it. It was either Mark Noodle or Steve Noodleberg, Larry Long, or Morgan Ingram. They said if you look at the word contacts and contracts, the only difference is the letter R, and that R stands for relationships. And so I think that's the big piece. And I swear it was Steve that told Larry. I could be totally wrong. Those guys are going to kill me. But I think that's the key of it, right? Is like, how do you build those relationships? And I talk about like going back to those closed lost deals that you've had in the past where you built great relationships, but you just lost, right? But you built that relationship, and that CHRO probably is going to go somewhere within the next year and a half, because they don't stay for 3 to 6 years, right? Guess what? I'm in the door. I don't even have to ask to be in the door now because we have that relationship. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think it's key. You're starting to see leaders focus on personal branding. I talked to a CRO last week, and his words were, "Hey, we're moving away from hiring traditional sellers. We're going to hire evangelists and storytellers." And I was like, that's it. It's powerful.
I mean, that's really what sales is. Right. Relationships and knowing how to articulate that story. You have to know enough about that prospect or target organization in order to weave an effective story together. But those are the things as a sales leader I'm trying to double down on with my team every single day. We've got to take the random components out of it. And you said something there that was really important as well, Darren. Like, I can think of a number of times in my career where I had a target prospect, I invested there. For whatever reason, they couldn't do business with me. But guess what? Then they went elsewhere and we did business. And it's because I was communicative, responsive, transparent. They wanted to do business with me. They knew me. I built a community around what we were doing. And I think that's what's lacking a lot of times in selling. We think about that one-to-one transactional mentality, like, oh, I've got to get a deal. Let me go to where I'm going to get the deal. But it isn't about that at all. In fact, some of my most lucrative deals, unfortunately, they took longer than I had wanted or expected in the moment. But you can create kind of that avalanche. by investing in relationships. I've had many deals that took, 2 to 3 years of continuing to invite them to events, continuing to take people out and get that intel and that knowledge that would make me more valuable, and then figure out, like, there's there's a lot of times, there's times where we have to uncover some pain that isn't evident.
Yeah.
Maybe another vendor did them wrong, or they had been burned by a seller in the past, or whatever it was. There might be these situations that we have to uncover and work through, and that's why we invest in the relationship.
Yeah. I think about this a lot too, right? Like, I've yet to meet a C-level leader that didn't get to where they were without a little bit of grit and a little bit of creativity. And so, and the reason I say that is, like, a lot of people hate on personal branding and social selling, right? But when you record a video and you screen share a part of their sustainability report on page 176, where it talks about something that you're actually doing, and you send that video of yourself doing that to a C-level leader, they see themselves in you, right? Because that's what they did 35 years ago, right? They were doing the different stuff. That's how they got to the point where they're at. So I always tell people, like, don't be afraid to do something crazy and do something unique, because that's what they did to get to where they were and where they are. And so I just challenge people, like, ship it. It's the worst that could happen.
You've got to be unique and you've got to stand out. I've been really fortunate because I've been in environments before, most of my career, where I've been able to do things outside the box. They often work, and it's worked out very well for me. Now, sometimes it doesn't, right?
No.
You've got to be very self-aware. You've got to be willing to take these strategic risks. But again, like, what are you risking ultimately? Like, I can be an also ran, I can do what everybody else does, and I can do the systematic approach. But the thing is, what you got to ask yourself, like, what do I want? What do I want out of my life and career? Do I want to get into a position where I can have more impact because of the things that I'm passionate about? Yes. I did a segment like recently about lead from every seat.
Yeah.
You can be very impactful and influential in whatever role you're in, even as an individual contributor all the way up to a C-level. But here's the thing. If you want to continue advancing and continuing to get yourself into a position where you can influence and impact more people, you got to stand out. You got to do it different. You got to do it outside the box. You got to be creative, and you got to take some risks sometimes. And they don't always pan out. But guess what? If you do it more often than not and you consistently execute over time, it will work for you.
Yeah.
I often tell people, like, especially if you want to get promoted, you've got to make yourself the obvious candidate for that. You have to de-risk the decision from the hiring manager so much that they're able to say, like, the planets align here. This is the obvious person. But guess what? Sometimes even when you're the obvious choice, you won't get it. That's why the grit comes in. You've got to continue to push through. I've been passed up for promotions. I've been laid off. I've lost jobs. I have had numerous things happen to me that have been setbacks over the years. But guess what? You just keep getting up and going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And gosh, I love that. That last statement is so powerful, because oftentimes, I'll be honest with you, like, when younger sellers look at guys like yourself, we don't see that behind the LinkedIn curtain, right?
Sure.
Like, and I think it's important to share that stuff. And also, I would say that, like, one of the most important pieces to this whole puzzle is working with leaders that give you the psychological safety to do this stuff.
Yes.
And so, like, I've been truly blessed to work with individuals like Jamie Kasopsky and Larry Schaefer at Insperity, where, like, they let me do whatever I wanted, right? But, like, try crazy stuff that worked, and sometimes it didn't, all the way to working at BetterUp and having a team that said, like, hey, we like this social selling stuff. Just keep doing that. I don't care if you email or call anyone this whole month. Just keep doing what you're doing. And then now being able to work with Lindsay and Sean and the team at Wellthy, like, they're allowing me the freedom to do that. And listen, I do stuff sometimes totally doesn't work, right? But that's okay, because I just wasted a day, right? And now I can move on and do something different. And so I think the key is just, like, finding those leaders, and those leaders are going to become really, really hot commodities moving forward for organizations, because the generation before me or after me, it's a whole world of social.
You said that so perfectly, Darren. I actually played follow the leader. My start within Microsoft was a little rocky for me. It was challenging. It was a new terrain. Trying to understand the processes. I remember when I was prospecting on LinkedIn, and people would be like, "I'm not sure what Carson's doing. He says he's prospecting on LinkedIn. I don't even know what that means." Um, but I take a little bit of something from everybody, whether it was a manager that was a bright shining star or somebody where we didn't have a great relationship. But several years ago, I found somebody who was my general manager in the small and mid-sized organization, and I ultimately followed them into the business that I am today. It's now my direct boss. Her name's Julie Lears, best people manager I've ever had or worked for. And so you got to find those people that'll believe in you, bet on you, and give them your best. And
It's
it works.
interesting.
It works.
I made a post, I don't know, a month ago that kind of went viral. And I said, gone are the days where, I don't know, I'm going to mess up the names. Gone are the days where Lindsay wants to go work with, ABC company. Here are the days where Jess wants to go work with Shannon.
Yes.
Like we're following those leaders that we know that will help us thrive and help us become not only really good employees, but really good husbands and dads and brothers and sisters and families as well. And that's the key.
Love that so much. That's a great place to be. And to wrap up, if anything, I think we got across the value of social tools in creation of brand and also as a portal to great authentic relationships. And ultimately, relationships have always been and will always be what makes the world go round. Anything else you want to hit on before we sign off, Darren?
I'm grateful for you. Thank you for taking the time to invest in younger emerging leaders. It says a lot about who you are as a person, and I'm grateful.
No, thank you. I learn every time we speak, and I look forward to the next time already. Darren, thanks so much. Safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
Cheers.